For my business endeavor in this class, I decided to create something that is actually my dream to do eventually. So it's been my dream ever since I was in high school to start an orphanage and to be a mother of the children who don't have a present one. Hence my project idea, which is to build an orphanage in Guatemala. So with every entrepreneurial endeavor, there's always problems to solve. In this case, there are 4 different problems that we have to solve. Currently, in Guatemala, there's over 500,000 orphans, and 1 child is abandoned in Guatemala every 4 days. A lot of these children lack support, safe work, daycare services, and many families in Guatemala struggle to provide adequate care for their children. This gap in support leaves over 50% of children under the age of 5 chronically malnourished. So, though international adoption is currently closed in Guatemala, this problem has not been dissipated. Children who are left abandoned by their families are searching for purpose and meaning in their life. James 1:27 is very clear about how we need to approach widows and orphans by saying pure religion that God our Father accepts as pure as faultless is looking after widows and orphans in their distress to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. As our job as Christians, I believe it's our responsibility to look after children and youth. They're our next generation of leaders, presidents, doctors, nurses, teachers. It's our job now to develop these leaders to be all that they can be. So there's also a lot of opportunity with these problems. With problems, there's always opportunity. And in this case, there's a lot of opportunity for these children who will live in this orphanage. So youth who live in this orphanage will have the opportunity to learn a trade that will give them a sustainable life when they age out. Youth will learn through Bible and language classes to help develop that side, and they will also have the opportunity to implement what they are learning in real time. They will also be mentored by those who are older of the same gender. So there's a lot of aspects involved in the orphanage. They're going to learn a trade that they'll really perfect and they'll craft. So when they leave the orphanage, they'll be able to have a trade that gives them a sustainable life. And they'll also learn more about Jesus through Bible classes. They'll learn how to speak English, which is vital in the world that we're living in. English is becoming a non-negotiable. And then being mentored and developed by people who can genuinely care about them and invest in them and pour into them. That's going to be so important. So there's a solution. So youth will not only have a roof over their head and food in their bellies, which are both great, but more than that, they'll learn a trade and practice it as they learn. So they will have acquired knowledge of this trade that will help them get a job once they age out. So trades will look like a variety of things. It can be a trade in agriculture. As in Guatemala, farming is really, really popular and they need farmers. Or it can be computer science, just learning how to work a computer, learning the science behind it to give them a job. Or it can be as simple as creating purses that will allow them to sell in the market and create a life this way. Our mission for the orphanage is to create youth of character and skill who will learn how to be sustainable once becoming adults. That's our mission. It will serve the youth who do not have a place to call home in Guatemala. Again, this could come from a variety of circumstances of parent abandonment, families just not being able to have a huge family, and youth ending up in this orphanage. There's a lot of different scenarios that could lead to youth being in this orphanage. In our marketing and distribution strategy, the orphanage will be marketed across mainly churches in America who I will ideally have partnership with as the founder of the orphanage. Building those relationships and connections are huge. And then distribution of what is happening in the orphanage will be displayed through monthly newsletters to donors. Also not listed is through email communication, through the internet. Facebook has been a great tool to even just create a page showing people what's been going on in the orphanage, sending pictures, giving stories. We know that people are impacted by storytelling, and so I plan to share just stories of these youth, where they've come from, but how this orphanage has been helping them. As for the cost and revenue, so the main way the orphanage will make money is through donations from these same donors who I have a connection with. And then another way is through grants from the government. It will require working a lot with the Guatemalan government to get grants created to help pay for the creation of the orphanage, and more importantly, to help sustain the orphanage. We're really heavily relying on our donors, so this may take some time to build, but I feel confident that if God has placed this dream in my heart, He will provide the financial donors needed to make it happen. So there's different phases in our strategy for the orphanage. First, of course, the orphanage is going to be built and we will receive funding initially for it. So we can't start building the orphanage until we have a sustainable amount to actually create the orphanage, to build it on the land that we purchase. Ideally, the second phase would be to identify the youth who's going to live in the orphanage. This could be through the government, through local churches, through different avenues. This can also come from youth who are already in other orphanages or those who have been kicked out of their homes, like I said earlier. So third, the youth will enter the orphanage and decide on the trade they want to learn. This is when they decide the trade they're going to learn over the course of the next few years to really develop, and that way they will have this when they leave the orphanage. Next, the youth will learn this trade for an extended period of time. However many years they're in the orphanage will be however long they have to learn this trade. And then lastly, the youth will eventually age out of the orphanage and ideally get a job in the trade field that they were just learning over the past few years. So our outcome is that youth will learn a trade in the orphanage that they can take with them as a career once they age out of the orphanage. The ROI is that the goal would be to personally create a business that youth, once hitting 18, could become employed at, and in return, I would have workers who I know have the work ethic and character qualities to sustain the business. So I really want to be careful here and not just to create, workers for myself and create culture of slavery or however you want to call it. But it would be great to create a business where if certain youth weren't able to get a job outside of a different trade that they get a skill in, they would be able to come work for me and I would be able to pay them for that. So it could even be, for example, say the orphanage eventually has babies who come into it. Those youth could really form a trade in design and building, and could build cribs for the orphanage where I could easily employ them and pay them for those type of skills. So the competitive advantage of my orphanage compared to others in Guatemala is that it doesn't just house youth, but it gives them a sustainable way to live once they age out of the orphanage. So what makes this orphanage different is the sole reason that these youth will learn a trade that will be completely free to them and will eventually help them get a sustainable career. So they don't even have to pay for this learning. It's all completely free to them. They're getting developed spiritually, emotionally, physically, and not a lot of orphanages in Guatemala currently have that model. So there's a lot of traction and milestones. So in a perfect world, those that are occurring for my entrepreneurship endeavor is a solid team of financial donors that are first in place. Then land has been bought to build the orphanage. Then the first cohort of 10 youth will live in the orphanage, and they will have been determined. Then the skills to teach will have been decided on, like I said earlier, computer programming, agriculture, etc. Also, another milestone is that the skills teachers and house workers will have been hired. These are really credible people, and hopefully also in partnership with the local churches, they can provide people who are of good character, but also are really competent. And then from there, there will be a grant that has been given from the state to help fund the orphanage as well. So why us? Why our team? The team of people who are creating the skills the orphanage has a passion to see the lives of youth transformed in Guatemala. So through this transformation, they have a desire to see youth come to know Jesus as their personal Lord and Savior, while also gaining entrepreneur skills that they will be able to use for the rest of their life. So this endeavor really is twofold. So building up youth to be followers of Jesus, youth who are in love with Jesus and who are growing in Him, but also youth who are learning a skill and who will eventually be able to use this skill to create a sustainable life for themselves. So other key points in this initiative is that there are many orphanage that are currently in Guatemala. So most of them are established with consistent funding coming in and permits acquired. So this could be a potential challenge of people when they decide what orphanage, or the government when they decide what orphanage to send a child. There's already a lot of really good orphanages that are established, so that might give us a bit of a challenge. Some of our obstacles also include getting permitting for all that is going to take place in the orphanage. So permitting takes a long time. There's permitting that you have to get from the Department of Health and different people to really create the orphanage and to start the orphanage. Another obstacle is getting the government's backing, as this is a new initiative, and this requires a lot of prayer, just favor to get the government's really blessing and their approval for this orphanage. And then another one is just the design refinement, so getting the right people on board to really design how it should look like. Obviously, I'm one person, I can't do it myself, but who are the people that I can bring around me to really help design and make this orphanage the best that it can be, and also just have people speak into it, speak into the areas that might not be working, and speak into the areas that need to be refined. So our launch plan, our next steps include to start partnering with donors who will help fund the orphanage. So really casting vision to people maybe that I already know, but also people that I don't know, and explaining the idea of the skills orphanage, of these children whose lives will be transformed by coming to this orphanage. By sharing vision, people are impacted. They're not necessarily impacted by anything else other than just what you plan to do and the vision behind what you're asking them for. So until there is funding, there's not much we can do. So this will already be done. Hopefully by the time we buy the land where the orphanage will be built. It's a big faith goal to have about $60,000 to be able to buy land to build this orphanage on. And then from there, you hire a construction team to start building out the houses, also the workers' housing, and then from there, getting the necessary permits from the government to open it. Ideally, if we start now, we're looking at a launch date of 2022. So that's where you come in. This skills orphanage is going to change lives for decades to come. Generations are going to be impacted forever because of people like you. So would you consider partnering with me and creating a place for young people who have no family to learn about Jesus while also learning a trade that will give them a sustainable life? I ask that you think about it, you pray about it, and you consider coming on this journey with me to help children become the leaders of tomorrow, and to also help these children impact their country and make their country and the world a better place. Thank you.